What's up, guys? It's Coach Gaglione here. This is another edition of the Powerlifting for the People podcast. I'm your host, Coach Gaglione, and I've been involved with powerlifting and strength coaching for over 14 years. And today we're talking about the bell curve. And the bell curve is just a way to look at normally distributed data. And fortunately for us, and this is going to be a good kind of chat today, we have found over the course of time, there's a couple examples of what we see in normal distributions in everyday life. So typically we'll see height, weight, strength of the general population kind of displayed in this fashion. So you can kind of look up what a bell curve looks like on Google if you'd like, if you're not familiar with some of those basic statistics. But a bell curve is basically a graph that is considered a normal distribution. The top of the curve shows the most likely event of the data collected. And then after we can kind of figure out what is quote unquote average, then you can figure out what standard deviations are. So this is important for many different reasons, especially for the people that kind of feel like they're stuck, or maybe the people that quote unquote feel like they don't have quote unquote great genetics. Some of that may be in your head, so I'm hoping that this discussion helps sort that out for you and to see what's possible. I think one of the biggest things that's really challenging for people nowadays, especially in the advent of social media and the internet, is that we are consistently and constantly comparing ourselves not only to the top 1 or 2% elite, but snapshots of the top 2% or elite. So just kind of understanding a little bit on how data works and what we can expect, what kind of results we can expect for certain people, I think is important. If you're really kind of nerdy and you are interested in more data, someone like Greg Nuckols is a good person to follow. But I think this will be a very kind of basic introductory discussion, and at least kind of help shed some light and give you a little bit of insight on maybe what you can expect from results yourself. Because the truth is, as in any athletic endeavor, when you start playing Little League football, there's only going to be a certain percentage of those Little League football players that make it to middle school, and a smaller percentage is going to make it to JV. A smaller percentage is going to make it to varsity, and a smaller percentage is going to make it to play college, and a very, 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 very tiny percentage will make it into professional or the NFL. And you could say will go for other sports, but for some reason, in terms of strength, some people kind of think that, there's this never-ending potential of strength, and I think that there is a lot more potential to advance the ranks in terms of powerlifting, because you could still achieve a high level of strength even in your upper 30s and even upper 40s. And for some freakazoids out there, even in their 50s. And I think you can continue to get stronger, especially if you can manipulate your technique, your body weight, and have a good handle on your training program, recovery, and overall frequency of training and intensity of training. So the good news is there's a lot more flexibility in powerlifting, and there's a lot more opportunity for long-term growth if you play your cards right. So some things to note is, number one is don't compare yourself to anyone else but yourself. Number two is to be patient. And the last piece is just be objective of maybe where you're at and where your progress. So the whole thing with the genetics debate, you don't really know where you fall on the bell curve, or you don't really know where you fall in terms of genetics until you actually really try. And I'd say you probably don't really know until you're maybe 5 or maybe even upwards of 10 years into it, to really know what your true potential is. And that's assuming that you're not really taking any breaks. So most people, if they feel I'd say on average, some people's, assuming that their body weight is pretty consistent, I think the first somewhere between 6 to 18 months in that range, so on average a year, but somewhere between 6 to 18 months, the progress starts to stall a little bit. You kind of exit that novice phase, and you kind of, those newbie gains stop. So unless you kind of increase your body weight substantially, that's usually when progress starts to stall a little bit and you start to plateau, and just strength gains slow down, and that's totally normal. So just kind of realize that's just part of the game. But I'd one of my goals is to get more people involved in strength training and powerlifting and competing for the long term. So just realize that's very normal. I've just seen, what I've seen is the people that really excel early on, and then they hit that kind of plateau that first year of competing. If they can kind of push through that, like that tough spot, then they could really excel even more. So I have found personally the people that have gotten the most success in our program have been the ones that have been stuck with it for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. If you look at someone like Larry Williams, we've worked together on and off for, it's going on 6 years now. And, when he first started with us, he was still at a very high level. So he's one of those people that are in the top tier, percent of the bell curve, which I will explain in a second. But he still added, he's going for now close to a 2,400 pound total, and he started at 1,900 pounds. So he had a higher starting point than everyone else, but he still made substantial progress, and he's still, he's added several hundred pounds to his total over the course of 5 or 6 years, which is still a pretty great rate of progress, even though, I think that if somebody can add, 50 pounds to their total every year, that's pretty great, especially at that level, especially at such a high starting point. So it's all perspective. But the longer you're in the game, the longer you pay attention to your diet, you pay attention to good proper training, you get coaching, you could really maximize your quote unquote genetic potential. So one of the things I think is important to note, so most people, one of the things that's kind of cool is, we have a pretty good system for coaching people and outlining programs for people. And one of the reasons why I don't completely individualize things, especially right off the bat with people, I want to get a baseline on how they respond to a more general program, and then we could kind of tweak variables from there. Since 2012, we've had over 70 lifters gain national ranking under our programming and with our guidance. Obviously, they did the work, but under our system, they've achieved at least a top 50 ranking in their weight class and division, and several in the all-time rankings in the top 40 and top 20 in the world in their weight class and division as well. And we've had several lifters over the years, qualify for national level meets like the Arnold XPC finals, etc. So the cool thing is that we've had a lot of those people be homegrown, and there's a lot of potential for you to really exceed that, your potential with proper training, with proper programming, and good coaching and good guidance. So what you're going to find is if you have a pretty good program, this is where I think people get really a little crazy with the programming, and I do think a good program can help a lot. But I do think your attitude, your effort, and your consistency are more important than the actual program itself. If you're putting an effort on a certain particular program, whether it be ours or somebody else's or working under the guidance of a coach, I believe there's many ways to skin a cat. I do think that there's certain principles that you need to kind of adhere to. It's not to say that you could do anything. You have to kind of, have some specificity in there close to the meet. You have to have some sort of, manipulation of volume and intensity as you get closer to the contest. In general, you want higher volumes and higher frequencies further out from a meet, and more general training usually further out from meet, and then more specific, more intense and lower volume training closer to the meet. But in general, I think as long as you're having some sort of progression over time, and over time you're consistent, over time you're putting in a lot of effort, and the intensity and as long as the weight in the bar is incrementally increasing over time, and you're putting in effort and you're warding off injuries as much as possible, you're going to make some progress and you're going to do really well. So, but again, the things that you are in control of, let's say you're working with a coach, you can control your attitude and you can control your effort. So those are the things that I would focus on. I would not focus on things that worrying about if you have good genetics, or worrying about if you're at your genetic potential, or if you have another PR in you. Just focus on bringing the best attitude you can to your training sessions, bringing the best attitude you can to your workouts, and putting in a consistent effort over time. That's going to yield the best results for you. So in terms of the bell curve, and again, I'm going to make some I'm going to round up some numbers just to kind of make it easier math, and just so the statisticians listening, you don't need to kill me here with this. But that kind of middle of the bell curve, on average, I would say somewhere about 70%, close to 70% of the people is going to kind of make up that that piece of the bell curve. Okay. So a very, very good portion of the people, the majority of the people, are going to be on either side, somewhere in the middle of that bell curve. So what that kind of tells you is that on average, you are probably going to fall in this range here. So probably most general good practices are going to work for you. And this is one of my biggest kind of gripes with having programs be so crazy individualized. The truth is that we do need to respect individual differences. You do need to respect, certain, your leverages, your body type, your joint mobility, the person's injury history, and your mental state and all these things. And there's many factors to consider as a coach, but at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And I don't think that we're really that much different, and I don't think we're all that special. I don't think you quote unquote need a quote unquote snowflake program right off the bat. I think you just need to learn the basics. You need to learn the skill of the lift. You need to find a technique that works for your body type and adheres to the standard of the power lifts, and respects your body. So obviously there's a lot of individualization that just kind of goes into even just finding your own technique. But once, in general, there's going to be certain rules that apply. For squats and deadlifts, you want to keep the barbell over the midfoot. You want to find, a width and a stance that respects your joint integrity and allows you to lift the most weight in the most efficient way possible, cutting down the range of motion. And that goes for, the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. And you need to adhere to the rules of powerlifting. You need to be able to hit a below parallel squat. You need to be able to touch your chest on a bench press. And you need to be able to lift a barbell from the floor. And I would say at least 70%, if not more, of the population can do that without much problem. And there's a lot of general techniques and general rules that will work. On either side of that bell curve, there's going to be, your slight genetic outliers in either direction. So, 13 to 14% on either side. So you have some people that are a little bit more gifted than others, and then people that are maybe not so gifted than others. So, if you maybe were an athlete growing up, maybe this was the person. So somebody that's maybe on like more of the bottom, the lower end of the middle. So that bottom, like 13% past the middle. That might be someone that, might need to work a little harder to achieve like a national ranking or achieve a high level total. It might take them, I would even consider myself in this category. I was never an all-county wrestler. I was never an all-county athlete, but I trained my butt off, and it was not due to lack of effort. I just didn't have a lot of skill. And I truly, just for the amount of effort and time I put in, it took me nearly 10 years in powerlifting to get my first nationally ranked lift. I believe, trying to think. Well, yeah, I think maybe that could be, close to 10 years. Maybe not. Maybe it took me about 8 years. But like my first meet ever, I squatted 375, which is nothing earth-shattering. And then my best squat ever in competition was 900 in equipment. I've squatted 705 in raw and 750 in wraps. And I've done an 800-pound squat in 6 different weight classes equipped. So, but that took me almost 15 years to do that. And now you see, teenage kids and junior lifters, squatting 800 pounds and just, raw with wraps. So, that being said, I was able to achieve a high level, and I was able to do something that no one else has done, squatting 800 pounds in 6 different weight classes. So even though I would consider I was not a great natural athlete, I was not able. So if you were able to achieve a high level of success, like in high school, and because you only have a 4-year window, so if you were like an all county, I would say if you're an all county or like a all state athlete in something. That's going to tell me that you have a quicker rate of progress. You probably have more fast twitch muscle fiber than the average person. So, you're probably going to be more on the other side of the bell curve, that upper 13 or 14% past the middle, and you're going to be able to achieve progress a little bit more quickly. So if somebody is able to achieve a nationally ranked total in their first year, I would say you're probably on like that side of things. So if you're able to maybe qualify for USAPL Nationals, or you can hit an elite total or a pro total in your first like year or two of powerlifting, I would say that there's a lot of potential there. Again, that is not me. It took me nearly a decade just to become like a pretty good, decent local lifter. And at the end of the day, I still I have one decent lift. I have a pretty good squat. I have a decent deadlift, and then my bench is average at best. And that's with not due to lack of effort and lack of knowledge. So, if anything, I really understand what somebody maybe is kind of quote unquote going through. If they're kind of mentally struggling, or if they feel like they haven't had a lack of progress. There was a point in time where my deadlift did not move. It actually, as I started gaining body weight, my deadlift didn't move for 3 years. So a lot of people would quit then, but then again, and so I was stuck around 500 pounds. And, since then, I've deadlifted 700 from the floor, and I've pulled 660 in competition. I've pulled 600 in 5 different weight classes at this point. So, and, there was a 3-year span where my deadlift was stuck right around 500. So imagine if I quit then, and there was still so much more potential there. So I could have been like, well, I have bad genetics, or I'm at my genetic ceiling. But I just kept working. I kept putting in effort. So even though maybe I was a little bit, toward the bottom end of that athletic and explosive spectrum, I was still able to achieve a great result. So if you kind of combine the middle of the bell curve and that upper part and the middle part, that's going to account for 96% of the people. So if you're listening to this, that's probably where you're at. Just realize that if you feel like you're not just be a little bit more patient. If you feel like your progress is going slower, and that's totally fine, but just realize that you can achieve a great result. If you play your cards right, you might need so people on the bottom of that middle piece, you're definitely gonna have to pay more attention to your nutrition, your sleep. Getting some coaching is going to be warranted. If you're on that upper part of things, like I said, you were more maybe athletically inclined earlier in life, you maybe had some sort of status or accolades, you're probably going to, in the beginning, not need to pay as much attention to your diet and things like that. Maybe you're naturally leaner, maybe you have naturally higher muscle mass. Again, using myself as an example, my body fat was as high as it was over 40% at one point. It's about 16% now. And I've literally been working my butt off like every single freaking day with very little breaks for the past 4 or 5 years. And it's been a huge focus. It's been a top priority in my life. So that's not typical for most people. But again, if you're on that bottom piece, you may need to put that much effort and time in if you want to get a really great result. So it's just something to consider. Now, for the rest, that's 96% of people. You could probably get by, like I said, just using, having some good coaching, having a team behind you, getting some, and just putting in a lot of effort over time. You're going to get a great result over time. The rest is that last 4%. So, the bottom 2% and the upper 2%. This is the elite of the elite. So, someone like a Larry Williams, he's going to be in that upper 2%. He started out at a very elite level. He started out hitting pro totals as a teenager. So if you're a teenage lifter or a junior lifter, and you're able to compete with the open lifters at a high level, at a national or world level, if you were a collegiate level athlete, if you're obviously a professional level athlete, then you're going to be in that upper 2%. That's a very, 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 very tiny percentage of people. These people are going to have potential to break all-time world records, to get into the top 20 of all-time rankings. So again, if you were like a high-level collegiate athlete or an All-American, so one of my old training partners, Dominici, comes to mind. Dominici was one of the first lifter. He was the first lifter to total 2,000 pounds under our system. He was also the first person to squat 800 pounds raw under our system. Since then, he's gone on his own, and he's done great things, and he's squatted 900 pounds successfully in competition. He did gain some body weight in order to achieve that goal, but still very, very high level, and he was able to hit a world-ranked squat. And just for reference, he was an All-American baseball player, and he was also had a tryout with the Boston Red Sox. So, I don't want to speak for him, but I just want to give those are some facts. So that would just kind of show that he is in that top 2%. He has that athletic gifts and starting point that some people do not have. So he should be able to achieve that result, and it doesn't take the work away from him. But it just kind of shows that that's the potential that he has had. So there are some indicators to kind of know. So the fact that he was an All-American baseball player, he played his first at-bat, he hit a home run in college, that kind of shows the potential that he has. And he was able to achieve a very high level of powerlifting as a result of his work and diligence and gain in body weight, etc. So that could be a clue of what your potential might be. If you look at someone like a Laura Phelps, who is, in my opinion, the greatest female equipped lifter of all time, she was a high-level gymnast, I believe, before transitioning to equipped powerlifting. She's hit world records from the 148 class to the 198 class. So to me, she's like the most versatile and the greatest lifter of all time, just because she's been able to hit so many all-time world records in so many weight classes, and she's a fantastic person. I think that she deserves more credit than she gets. So the other flip side of the coin is that bottom 2%, and I think that way too many people think that they're in this really, really low percentage, and it's statistically it's highly unlikely. But if you are somebody that there are some people out there that you're always hurt, you no matter how hard you try at something, you spend several years at something and you just never really seem to make any progress. Notice how I said several years. I don't have a lot of experience with this person, and again, this is not like so say someone like my mom, for example. She started later in life, maybe not be the best example, but no matter how hard she tries, she's doing fantastic, and I love her to death, and she's doing great, but she's not going to be a national level lifter, especially now. That being said, she's also in her upper 60s now, so maybe it's not the best example, but she's achieved a lot of success. So she's gone from not being able to handle 5-pound dumbbells to being able to bench around 75 pounds. She's gone from not being able to, really squat her body weight that effectively, even with a box, and now she's able to squat, around 100 pounds, which is fantastic and it's amazing. But it's nowhere near nationally ranked level, even as a master's lifter in her category. It's fantastic. It's great, and I'm proud of her. But I would it's just, for her, her goals are obviously health, but let's say if her goals were to be like a national champion, it's just not going to happen even if she was able to lift for another 5 or 10 years. And I hope that she's able to, have a happy and healthy, and she's very healthy for her age, and she looks great for her age, and she's getting stronger. Her bone density is improving. But her goals, it would just be foolish of her to, try to strive for like an all-time world record total, for example. So kind of just knowing what level we're at in the bell curve, I think is important. But you'll never really know. So there are some hints. I think if you didn't play sports, you might not be able to know. But there are some hints on where your potential might be. But the moral of the story, like I said, using myself as an example, if you really won't know what level you can get to in powerlifting or any sport unless you put 5 or 10 years in. I truly believe that you can't really tell if you're going to be really good at something until you put several years into it. And if you want to be truly great, I really believe that you got to put in at least a decade consistently. And that goes for business, that goes for relationships, that goes for life. So that's just there's a couple of take homes for this thing. Most of us fall in the middle of the bell curve. We're not special snowflakes. Most of us have, probably average genetics, if you're listening. And you still can achieve a very high level. And I think for somebody that's kind of in the middle of the bell curve, I think, getting ready to do a national level meet or hit a top 50 total in their weight class, I think those are all really reasonable and fantastic goals. But I just think that you should take your time, stay in your lane, and not be in a rush. So someone like, we got a couple of different lifters. Like Jose is a great example, Jose Martinez, and this is not a knock on him. Not the greatest, body fat percentage. He's got pretty not great, not the best proportions for powerlifting. Besides him being a little short on the shorter side, he's just, he gets a ton out of his body for the amount of muscle mass that he has. He's a 600 plus squatter and deadlifter in the 181 class, and he doesn't have a crazy amount of muscle. He's not super jacked or super explosive or anything, but he works damn hard. It took him 3 years of consistent effort to make it to the Arnold and finally qualify. Another lifter, Mel that we coach, and she's been a great part of our team. I would say she was a little bit more on the slightly maybe on the left side of the bell curve, but again, she came in with a little bit more strength, but she was able to, transform her body. She's dropped down 3 weight classes. She's totaled 1,000 in 3 different weight classes. And again, it took her several years to do that. It took her about 3 years to do that. And now she hit her first pro total, and she's making her pro debut at 148 at the Arnold. So there's lots of examples like that. Then someone, we have a Brandon Horn, or, he came in, again, probably a little bit more athletically inclined, a little more explosive. He started out, his first couple of months with us, he was able to squat 500 pounds, which is not typical. And now he's going, he hit 760 squat in the gym, and he's going for his first 800-pound squat. So, and that's raw. So he's advancing a little bit more quicker because, again, he's got a little bit more of potential to do great things, and that's fine. And there's going to be other people that, we have some other lifters that with us, if they stick with it, I know they're going to be 700-pound squatters, 800-pound deadlifters, et cetera, based on, their past athletic experience and just their muscle mass and things like that. So focus on what you can control, not what you can't. It's not about the cards you're dealt. It's how you play your cards. And I think that if you are in that 1% of really elite people, I think you owe it to yourself to take advantage and try to see if you could break a record or, achieve a world ranking. I think that's something special, and I think that you should pursue that. And if you're somebody that maybe, just no matter how hard you try, maybe you're always banged up, or you kind of falling a little short, or you're just not athletically gifted, I just don't think there's anything wrong with just being a more recreational lifter and just really just focusing on your own personal progress and PRs. No matter where you fall on the bell curve, just do the best you can. Focus on yourself. Focus on your own personal growth. And if you are in the game for 5 or 10 years or 15 years like myself, I guarantee you'll be more competitive over time, whether you want to or not. If you're in the game, if you put in consistent effort over time, that's going to yield the best results. So, just realize that maybe it's not always the program. It's not always your genetics. Sometimes it's just a matter of knowing you have the ability inside you, and you just have to you have to focus on having a better attitude, bring into your training, believe in yourself, and just put in more time. Sometimes you just have to work harder, and you have to work longer, and you have to do more, and you have to be more. And that's really what it's all about. So, again, focus on what you can control, not what you can't. More likely than not, you fall in the middle of the bell curve. You're not a special snowflake. But that doesn't mean we don't love you and we don't want you to succeed. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you found this podcast helpful, please give it a 5-star review. It helps other people find it. Check out the links below if you want to support the program. Thank you guys so much for listening. Until next time, stay strong, and we'll see you soon.